Welcome back to Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV, and today's guest is Dr. Collins Odote, a law lecturer at the University of Nairobi. He's also a governance expert. And so our viewers will have noticed that during the break, there was an ad, hashtag Kenya Praise. There are other hashtags, Nane Nane Sio Mwisho. There are other hashtags, peaceful election.
There's one in Kibera that says, piga kura usipige mtu.
Okay. So is this concern for peace our normal in Kenya?
You know, first of all, peace is a good thing, and we should always advocate for peace. But I think the conversations of peace over the last 1 week is because of the circumstance in which we find ourselves. We find ourselves staring into an election where we fear that those elections may be violent, and I think that's the heightened conversation about peace. But the second aspect of it is, unfortunately, our conversations about peace over the last 1 year has taken a polarizing aspect. That there are those who argue we want a peaceful election, and others argue no.
We want a just election.
We want
peace will come.
A credible election, because when we have a credible election, then peace will come. The reality is that we need both, and the two of them are interlinked. If you do not have a credible election, even if you advocate for peace, it will be false peace. If you do not have a peaceful election, even if you advocate for credibility, it will be false credibility. The reality is that IEBC have been struggling to deliver a credible election. That's what they've been working on, isn't it? The death of Chris is about violence, it's about lack of peace, and you see that death dents credibility. So it just shows you the link. So I think we need to stop this false dichotomy between credibility and peace. We need both, and we need to ensure we do everything possible to deliver both.
Here's what our viewers are saying. You are asking obvious questions. When the election is neck to neck, the strategy is to scare so others cannot vote. You recall that the question we're addressing this morning is how we can ensure that elections in Kenya are not so tense. Stop being used by politicians in the wrong way. That comes from Obinchu in Nairobi. We Kenyans have to be very careful with those reports of opinion polls and avoid the reports. Let us play our position and wait for the results. Cheche, ask your panelists why they are judging the IEBC harshly. Yet parties in their primary nominations were shambles. That was Chabi in Baringo County. Despite the fact that we're going for elections, we need to also look for other leadership positions, not just presidential, and the exercise of the Constitution to youth. That's Stephen in Nambale. So quite a bit.
Look, I think we have to give it up to IEBC, the commissioners especially. They've been in office for barely 7 months. They have done quite some good job. Remember, I've kept saying the only place they have failed as far as I'm concerned is communication. The last week and a half, they have done well as far as communication is concerned. But somebody talked about why we should be harsh on them. I don't think it's them. And like I said earlier, it's the institutions. Dr. Dote is a law expert, and he'll tell you our laws are very clear on voter intimidation. When somebody, a political party or a politician, does or says something that appears like it's intimidating voters, making them get scared and want to move, there's an institution that should take action. Where are these institutions? When party primaries fail, those are election processes. There's an institution entrusted with ensuring that there are laws that we have to abide by. Where are the institutions? What action have they taken? That's my question. It's nothing about IEBC or
And so we come to Collins. Let me preface that by saying that you contributed to or edited a book that documented the lessons learned from the 2013 elections as regards electoral laws. And so that's the context of our institution, and the fact that we're not implementing the laws that we have so beautifully created.
Odwak, you know, I thank the viewers for the feedback that they've given us. And I think sometimes as Kenyans, we forget that we are part of this country. And we forget that the individuals we put in charge of those institutions come from us. So we expect ourselves not to make any contributions, but these people to work miracles. And that's the context which I want us to, first I want to give chance in terms of IEBC. You know, nobody remembers that the commission has been in force for 7 months.
7 months, yeah.
And people were saying those 7 months ago, you can't change a commission with less than 2 years. We can't do this. We can't have credible elections. People forget that Chris has been at the commission for less than a year. So for me, as we discuss the things we're discussing, we also need to appreciate the work they've done. Come to the book that we did in 2013. In 2013, we had a conversation in terms of looking at the dispute resolution that the courts did, where they went wrong, and where they did a good job, and the places that they can work differently. I have been involved in trainings over the last 12 months, and there have been robust conversations about here is the kind of things that we did, here is the kind of things that we need to do in terms of preparations. Look at party primaries, for example. One viewer says party primaries was shambolic. What we then don't ask ourselves, there have been a lot of disputes, a lot of party primaries. How are those disputes resolved? I know from personal information that there are judges who are sitting on Saturdays and Sundays listening to cases. There are judges who are sitting on public holidays listening to cases. We don't speak about that. We only speak about the fact that institutions are not doing their duty. I think for me, a week too. In terms of preparations, I think institutions have tried. What we need to ask ourselves is whether institutions will be able to stand the test of time and do the right thing. But that's not preparations. That is about the social architecture. Do you have the commitment? Do you have the courage to be able to stand up?
So it starts with you and I.
Yes, because the pressures will be there.
But do you think the public has more confidence now, particularly in the judiciary, more than last time? Because the NASA and the Raila has said he will not go to court, he will lose it. The other day, the president and the deputy president were attacking the judiciary and the chief justice. So is that helpful?
I think two things, Mutege. First of all, and this is not from what we think, this is from objective polls. However objective they can be. The levels of confidence in the judiciary and the IEBC is not as high as it was in 2013. That's a fact.
Yeah.
It isn't something to... But the second consequence is that after 2013, the levels went extremely low. The levels we have now is higher than they were 2-3 years ago. So while they are lower than they were in 2013, they are on the upward movement. And I think our duty is to ensure they continue that upward movement. The second is, I think we must all ask ourselves to be responsible, including the politicians. Because the reality is people say, I don't have confidence in the commission. And if you look at the political class, let me talk about the two institutions. They've been claiming, I don't have confidence in the commission. When something happens which is to their favor, they say, I have confidence in the commission, it is X who does not have. The same way with the judiciary. Each of them says, I don't have confidence in the judiciary, but what do they do in the evening? They file an application, the next day they go to court. Because if you look at the last 6 months, both of them have gone to court. I think we need to ask ourselves, do we want to encourage people, do we want to encourage ourselves as a country to say, we don't have confidence in institutions? For me, this is the only country I have. And those institutions that are responsible must be able to deliver for me next week. Because if they don't deliver, the consequences is 2007. I don't want it.
And actually, if you look at it critically, Mr. Mutegi, the confidence that Kenyans have in these institutions is to the extent that their political leaderships do. If for example, somebody, look at the case of what we have now, Jubilee writing to the judiciary and saying we do not want Judge George Odunga listening to election-related cases on the bench. What do you expect of all Jubilee followers? They will say, if Judge Odunga is there, we don't have confidence in the court. So again, it's to the extent of what the leadership, the political leadership decides.
But even we are creating institutions. Look at the voter bribery, for instance. It is criminal. It is not allowed. But we have seen politicians giving money. We have seen them giving unga. And nobody has been arrested. So why would Kenyans want to have the confidence?
I'll tell you several things. The first one, do you know that sadly we changed our laws in 2016 to make cheating illegal?
We actually make it facilitation.
So for now, if you see a voter being treated, it is not a criminal offense. And that is, so we can
not bribery.
Bribery is still an offense. So the debate is, when you give unga, is that cheating or is it bribery? You see the thing, and that's something we did, and when we did it last year, unfortunately, a lot of us who are commenting on the laws were much more concerned with commenting on the laws from the prism of Jubilee and NASA. We weren't much more interested in this conversation that how do we remove treating from an offense. But the second is, if you watch the run-up to these elections, around March during party primaries, I've listened to the DPP telling us these are the number of people who are arrested committing election offenses. I don't think it is sufficient, but it is better than in the past. In the past, we never heard about who was arrested. So what we should be asking for is, can we ask these institutions to do more? But secondly, can we ensure that when they do it consistent and do it objectively?
Okay, so remember the Twitter question that we're asking, well, not quite Twitter, the question we're asking our viewers is, how do we ensure that there are no tensions around the elections? So, from the Calvin, Kenyans should as well be able to identify the right news from verified news centers. Fake blog posts may cause extreme tension. And then there is this from Julian. Tension in elections are caused by three things: historical factors, structural factors, episodic factors. These are not being addressed. There are several people who say engage in responsible dialogue. All eligible must vote. All votes must count. No one else. Okay? No one else dies. Leaders need to be careful on their utterances, and Wananchi made to understand that elections are never about life and death. It's just electing leaders. So what I'm noticing coming in is that more people are focusing on responsibility, speech, vote, go home. But earlier on, when I first asked the question, there were lots of people who talked about staying away from polling stations, but also mistrust. So if we were to come back to where we started, hate speech, the media, the role of the media, and this has been a big bugbear for us, it seems, across all elections, the role that we play in setting the agenda. Are we doing right by the country, Mutegi?
I don't think we can blame the media, but
not blaming, just asking, what role do we play in a democracy?
Setting the agenda, I think we should, I don't think we're doing much as the media people setting the agenda. We are just reacting to what politicians say.
But yet we can't blame them.
Yeah.
Mutegi, Kenyans should blame us, the media. I'll give you a practical example. Look at yesterday, the case of Joseph Orworth, Colonel Joseph Orworth, the KDF spokesman. What was the rush for the mainstream media houses to break the news that Professor Nyong'o has said he's lost, at a time when we were just counting hours after the disappearance and subsequent death of Chris Msando?
I think I can't speak for them, but everybody wants to have a scoop.
Yeah, but you see, Mutegi is a veteran journalist.
We're all senior journalists around here.
But Mutegi is not a veteran. I think to hear Mutegi say that we can't blame the media, I think is disappointing. We should be able to blame the media. And I think when you do so, when you take responsibility, then you're able to have the higher moral ground. And I think for me, over the next 7 days, Mutegi, my plea to you and my plea to media houses is, let us not allow ourselves to continue these partisan discussions, because it's dangerous to our country. Somebody must provide leadership. Unfortunately, there are too few people providing that leadership. We owe it to our country to be able to provide that leadership moving forward, so that at least we are able to progress peacefully, progress justly, and progress in a manner in which we are able to ensure that every citizen feels happy and says the glass is half full, but we are adding on to the water and not taking away from the water.
This is what our viewers say. In 2007, there was no chaos after voting, not during the voting. In fact, most of us police officers went to the polling stations to vote. When you deploy us in large numbers to the polling stations, then that's causing tension among voters. That's Cliff in Ruaraka. The election is already rigged because they printed more voters' cards and introducing manual voting. Ben in Nairobi, the press have demonized the IBC with your negative highlights. Give us positives. You can be helpful. We have some careless leaders who don't have integrity. Let's all be patriotic Kenyans. Cheche, the prayer is not the answer to peace. The answer is to address the issues that could plunge the country into violence. Good morning, Cheche. I have never heard the opposition preach peace. in their campaigns. They're only threatening the IBC and Jubilee, and this is why people are leaving town. And then there were others on Twitter who said, instead of preaching peace, we should be preaching justice. Collins, you've talked about the false dichotomy between justice and peace.
But the chicken and the egg scenario.
The chicken and egg scenario. And it was something that you pointed out earlier about people returning to their villages to vote, Mutegi's perspective, and others returning to their villages because they were afraid.
To get peace.
Charles's perspective. Again, how do we reconcile ourselves with some of these views that the opposition has refused to concede and therefore has refused to preach peace, and therefore they are the people who are causing, sowing alarm and panic and fear?
In 7 days,
I must point out that someone noticed that your surname starts with an O,
yes.
and therefore was viewing your contributions to today's conversation through that prism.
Sadly, that is what we like as a country.
And that is what Mutegi referred to when he talked about mistrust.
Yeah, and that's what we need to deal with. But for me, the reality is, if you look at that false dichotomy, and unfortunately is looked at from a political lens. You support side X, you want to focus on peace. You support side Y, you want to focus on justice. This country will not move until we realize that those two are sides of the same coin. And it behoves all of us. If I stick to one side and Mutegi sticks to another, we can argue here for the next 2 hours. We'll each think we've won. The only person who must win in this process is a country called Kenya. And that requires those who only think it's about peace to realize those who think about justice have a point. Those who think it's only about justice to realize that those who think about peace have a point. And why do I say so? I say so because the people that we then put in charge of, we are now here at Cheche. At the end of the day, it is citizen media. It is not your surname that is on the press. At the end of the day, those we put in institutions, it is the institution being judged. It is not their surname. So if we don't want to live up to that higher ground, then we must accept the fact that anybody we put in institutions, let's look at their surname and let's balance surnames.
The police officer made a point that people are moving away because of lack of security, not lack of security rather, because they were being deployed. And of course the whole controversy which you referred to about the KDF spokesperson's whereabouts had to do with the rumors which refused to go away that the KDF, the military, is being deployed. And that's been referenced by one of our viewers, only by not deploying KDF to polling stations. But isn't the reality of our situation in the country that there are areas that are inaccessible to polling agents, that are unsafe for voters? If you think about the attacks that we've had recently in Lamu, for instance, would that not justify the presence of KDF?
Look, the KDF is not there for elections. The KDF is there because of Al-Shabaab. The KDF cannot come to a polling station and start looking around at things or giving security. That's not their business.
There was an article by one of the senior retired officers in the military.
The former commandant of the Defense College.
And he made quite a point. He said the primary role of the KDF is to protect Kenya from external aggression. But the secondary role is to make sure that Kenyans are at peace and go on with their life as usual. One fact we cannot run away from is the country does not have the requisite ratio of police to civilians. If we are going to have more polling stations, over 40,000 polling stations, each of them is supposed to have at least 2 officers. What happens to people?
The military is not trained to do that.
The military is trained to take care of insecurity and say,
the military is not.
What's your objection?
My objection is the military is not trained to deal with civilians in this country, or even anywhere in the polling station. They are trained to fight wars.
For me, I think this debate takes us back to the same thing we said a few minutes ago, which is mistrust. And I think the bigger problem is what is the levels of information that we are having about the process and how objective is that information. Because at the end of the day, let's leave military for example. At the end of the day, you require the police to provide security, isn't it? But we also know from our past history that the police have been accused of interfering with the elections. So what is important is not a debate as to whether you require the police or not. I think what is much more important is to be able to know as a fact, have we deployed police? Because we must. How many? To where? then we are able to follow the trail and say we have deployed Collins to do XYZ. If you go to that, there may be situations. The primary responsibility of KDF, as Mutegi says, is not to provide internal security, but there may be situations.
Actually, if you listen to the argument,
the Constitution makes some provision for.
Yes,
if you listen to the argument,
before we come to you, can you remind us what the Constitution says when it comes to deployment of KDF internally?
I think for you to be able to do so, you would require authorization. That's the thing that is critical. And so the larger question for me is not whether that we are deploying or not. The larger question that we should be asking is, are we deploying? How many? Where? Through which process? Because when you do, then you are able to have very clear information. But when there is none, that's how fake news arise. Then you are able to
and actually, that was, if you
are Mamos, the document that was produced by us is fake. She was the one fake.
A few days after a spokesman saying it was genuine.
Yeah.
But again, back
taken out of context.
What I wanted to mention has just been raised by Dr. Dote. If you listen to the argument by NASA throughout the trail, it's not that KDF are being deployed. It's that the Constitution says for them to be deployed, even to take on external aggressors, there must be the approval of Parliament. Parliament is currently adjourned temporarily. We have not had them recalled and deploy and give authority for the deployment of the KDF. Because if you remember in Eldoret 2007 or 2008 at the beginning of the year, when push came to shove, KDF officers were actually deployed to clear the roads. They were deployed to push people back, aggressors back. So it's possible. I mean,
I think, if I'm not mistaken, and Collins, you correct me because you're the lawyer, there are two instances in which KDF can be deployed. One is through parliamentary authorization, and in the case of, I think, an immediate or an unfolding event, they are deployed, but they then come under the command of the Inspector General of Police.
And then you get authorization within the next 90 days. So for me, the bigger issue is not the legalist. The bigger issue for the ordinary citizen and for the process is the levels of openness and the levels of transparency. That's why I think sometimes the parties and debates misses the point. The larger issue should be, if we require, and if you've been involved in the trainings, you know, for example, because I've been involved in election security training, that during elections the numbers of police is stretched. So they actually go to even
Kenya Wildlife
Forest Service. So, but when you hear, so the question can be, you're even bringing Kenya Forest Service. But you see, we can avoid all this by having an open conversation. You're saying, by the way, for this election, we are deploying X number of police officers drawn from Y. And the rest of us as citizens must be willing to listen to what is being said, not to listen only from our own partisan perspective. So there is a responsibility both ways. A responsibility for those in charge of the process to communicate much more, a responsibility for those of us who are citizens to listen much more and to be able to then critique from a point of objectivity.
Okay, and so coming back to our viewers, I was appalled by what Professor Nyong'o said on one of our rival television stations, and this has to do with what you brought up about the missing KDF, the alleged missing KDF spokesperson, and referring to not blaming the media. Mutegi, the media can burn the country, and you will recall that in 2007 media stations were accused of being partisan. You cannot plan theft of elections and then shout about peace loudest. The peace talked about by few in central Kenya is equivalent to electing Uhuru. This is fake peace. I can assure every Kenyan and all Kenyans that you can't preach peace if there is no justice. No way. Morning Cheche, have you forgotten they say inside job, the IBC suspended, and now it's the ICT manager. 2013 tallying, what do you think? I think they're trying to draw together disparate...
They're trying to piece up.
Disparate events. Let's not pretend. We know the Kenya that we have. The election will never be free and fair unless the government stops interfering. And then, of course, people are moving away because of the lack of security in this country. Raila Rao has been screaming about this for a long time, and this is rubbish. So again, you know, in spite of the sobriety that some would like to see come about, Collins, I think your assessment of the Kenyan society, maybe not Kenyan voter, is is right and aligns with what Mutegi said earlier about the lack of trust.
I still would wish to understand, maybe viewers out there, what Dr. Dote referred to as this dichotomy. Justice and peace.
False dichotomy.
Yeah, I don't know. I am one of the people who believe that if you have justice, peace will follow. I don't know.
And one of our viewers, I think, agrees with you and talked about historical episodes, structural episodes, and I think something current, which I think feeds in with your perspective.
If you have justice, peace will automatically follow.
But if there is no peace, can you have the election?
If you have no peace, there will be no election, of course.
Exactly. There is no justice. So we need both. We need both. Yeah. If there are riots, if on a polling day you cannot access the polling station because some people are rioting. I remember at one time in 1988 we were doing that time we were doing Morongo elections.
Queuing. The
queuing thing. Very early in the morning at 6 o'clock in Krogoya, we took pictures of hundreds of people who had been beaten before they went to the polling station.
Why had they been beaten?
So that they don't access the polling stations because they knew they were going to queue for the wrong person.
And you know what that means? They were being denied justice.
Exactly. So the same way,
creating a lack of peace.
You see, you know, if you follow, we go back to 2007 and follow the work of the Kofi Annan process, you know that there were 4 agendas, and we only talk about agenda 4, which is about long-standing issues. We don't talk about agenda 1, 2, 3. Agenda 1, 2, 3 was actually this debate. Which one do we focus on? Do we focus on justice or do we focus on peace? The 2 commissions that we had, the Commission on Waki and the Commission of Kriegler, actually were addressing the 2 things. Waki was addressing peace and violence, Kriegler was addressing justice. And we couldn't agree because some people thought, no, the important thing is peace. Other people thought the important thing is justice. 10 years later, we should be wiser to realize that we progressed over the last 10 years because of efforts to discuss. Some people may not agree about how successful we have been in discussing Kriegler. Other people may not agree about how successful we have been in discussing Waki's report. But the reality is because we focused on them, we've made some progress. If we really want to progress, we must bury this dichotomy of saying that if justice is there, peace will follow. That is true. The same way, if we don't have peace, it will be difficult for us to have justice. So
would peace give us justice?
On its own?
Yeah.
No.
Would peace give us justice?
No.
Would justice give us peace?
On its own?
Yes.
On its own?
Yes.
Would justice give us peace?
On its own?
Yes. Give me my rights and I'll be peaceful with you.
Not necessarily.
I can give you your rights, yes.
But you can want more rights. You can be greedy. This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. Send us your thoughts about tension and elections. How can we stop tensions being necessary, a necessary accompaniment to elections in Kenya? Our SMS number is 22422, and you can tweet us using the hashtag Cheche.